Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Roundup. I'm Roshan Karyappa.
And I'm Gunjan Sa, and together we'll be bringing you the biggest highlights from India's startup ecosystem. Now, last week was full of shocking announcements.
Okay.
There was Bhavesh Agarwal, who is quitting Ola to join Uber as the head of India operations.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Zomato and Swiggy are in talks with the government to allow for cannabis delivery in India as soon as H2. So
Good news
that's
for some
good
people.
news.
Yeah.
And also, Karnataka government has banned registration of new startups in Bangalore to reduce the infrastructure burden on the city.
No, that can't be. Really?
Do you think
Okay.
any of these news is true?
Well, sorry folks, we couldn't resist that. We're recording this on April 1st. So happy April
Happy
Fools,
April Fool's Day.
I suppose.
Alright, so let's talk about some real headlines from the week. UPI is considering to levy an interchange fee on UPI transactions that are made through prepaid payment instruments. We'll talk about the world's biggest startup funding festival that wasn't.
The World Startup Convention? Something of that sort. Okay.
We'll also understand the entire story behind the acquisition of Zest Money by PhonePe and why did that not happen. So stay tuned as we break down the biggest headlines from last week. So, Roshan, how was the week for you?
Well, it's been a rather chaotic week the world over. I mean, the protests in France, Israel, Kenya, elsewhere. Some of this is obviously, connected. Some of it rather disconnected as well. I mean, I think the connection is, the post-COVID with this interest rates rising, inflation rising and all of that. There's a lot of discontent and it will find expression in various different ways, I should say, right? Did you watch John Wick 4?
Oh, no, I'm still yet to watch that.
I am yet to watch that as well.
I'm rerunning part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yeah, likewise. So let us know if you guys think it's a good movie that we should all check it out. I mean, I'll still watch it, but
It is a good movie. Alright, so let's get started. The National Payments Corporation of India, or NPCI, has recommended an interchange fee on UPI transactions, which is for over rupees 2,000, and that too transactions made through the prepaid payment instruments, or PPIs. This move is said to be aimed at increasing revenues for banks and payment service providers. Now, interchange fee is a fee that is charged by one bank to another bank for processing a transaction. So in the case of UPI, the interchange fee is paid by the bank of the merchant or the person receiving the payment, and this payment is done by the bank of the payer, or you. Now, while many people are saying that, hey, you know what, now customers like you and I, we'll have to pay a transaction fee for UPI, which is not the case. I think there's a very wrong portrayal in the media as to how this fee is going to be implemented. So, Roshan, can you help simplify this for our listeners?
yeah, I mean, there was a lot of brouhaha on Twitter, a lot of outrage that, hey, how can you charge for UPI transactions? Well, I can sympathize where this is coming from. UPI, we all know, is overwhelmingly a good public utility. It is a utility, right? I mean, it is like your roads and infrastructure, your highways and whatnot. And should we charge for UPI at some point? I'll get to that later, right? But this specific initiative, I think, think about the use case here, right? I mean, it's only for wallets. It doesn't, it doesn't apply when you are transferring from your bank account to another, even
That's
via
like
UPI.
what majority of UPI
Exactly.
transactions are.
So first of all, it's for wallet payments, and secondly, it's for wallet payments above 2,000 rupees. Now, if you typically look at wallet payments, I mean, these are of the order of 200, 300, 400,
Correct.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? I mean, your Swiggies, Ubers, Dunzos of the world, basically, right? Where you can sort of one tap pay for these services. Rarely, I mean, people pay like over 2,000 bucks on a wallet as such. So, if you look at the transactions, I would say this would be less than 1% of the transactions, right? So it's a corner case, basically. Right, so this is not prevalent, first of all. Now, coming to the point of whether, UPI transactions have to be charged. Look, there is no free meal, but at the same point, I mean, at the same time, I do feel that the government has to invest in public utilities, like they invest in roads and infrastructure. And you've been seeing, especially over the last 5-10 years, how much of, investment has gone into that kind of infrastructure, right? So UPI costs about 1,300 crores or so for the government to maintain. Now, in the larger scheme of things, 1,300 crores is really nothing. They will figure a way to recover that money, right, one way or another, and I think it should be, right? I mean, So the government should figure an innovative way to do that. This is more or less signaling that at some point of time, UPI transactions will be charged, right? And the government could perhaps again charge these transactions over a certain amount, right? And they could make it fairly competitive as well, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be free. Neither does it have to be the 1 to 2% that some of these credit card companies, etc., charge for MDR, right? Merchant discount rate. So it can be less than that. It can be very competitively priced, and it can be for a corner case. Given the amount of transactions, I think certainly 1,300 crores can be made in number of ways. Yeah.
So another thing here to point out is that the average ticket size of UPI peer-to-peer transaction stands at rupees 2,455, and for peer-to-merchant transactions, the number is at 860 rupees.
I would have really guessed that both those numbers would have been way lower than what they are actually. Yeah.
And one way of looking at this whole interchange fees for PPI instruments, right? This is, I think, a huge step forward for the entire UPI infrastructure. Look at what the government has done with QR codes. From a merchant standpoint, imagine you would have to keep, let's say, a PhonePe QR, a Paytm QR, n number of QR codes just to add convenience to the customers. But through UPI, NPCI consolidated everything into one QR code.
So I think the government is also trying to promote this direct transfer, right? And not through one of these wallet providers like, it could be Paytm or Bharat Pay or even Razorpay and so on and so forth, right? So I'm sure that, while I did see a thread by Vijay Shekhar Sharma that, this is hardly going to have an impact and so on and so forth. I don't know. I mean, if I was one of those payment companies, I mean, I will be a little wary, right? Because you've seen what the government has done with this whole BNPL space as such, right? Where they've really edged out all the people in between and tried to bring the consumer and the end banking entity a lot closer, right? So maybe, I don't know, I mean, the government may consider these quasi-banking entities beyond NBFCs, right? These payment folks will have to figure their own playground amongst that, right? But yeah, interesting development for sure.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next bit of news, let's talk about the World Startup Convention that was held in Noida. Well, and this was supposed to be the world's biggest startup funding event, but unfortunately, it did not turn out to be that. Startup founders had paid up to 50 lakhs or $60,000 to secure a booth and pitch to 10,000 plus investors as advertised. And these investors included the likes of Masayoshi Son, who is the CEO of SoftBank, Elon Musk, and a lot of people from the ministry, from the Indian government to be present. But all of these things was fake. It was a scam. And what was shocking was that India's biggest influencers like Ankur Warikoo, Chetan Bhagat, Praful Bilore and Raj Shamani recorded promotional videos for this event, right? And when the media reached out to them asking that, hey, this was a scam, they were saying that hey, we had no idea and we did not even know that our videos are going to be used for it. I think this has become a joke right now.
Yeah, it's a little sad that people lost money, right? I mean, the name itself sounds very scammy, right? I mean, World Startup Convention. And then look at all of the folks that were promised to be there, and Masayoshi Son and the others.
Elon Musk.
I mean, so sounds like a scam, looks like a scam, but then I mean, you had all of these influencers like Raj Shamani and Chetan Bhagat and Ankur Warikoo and so on, right? I mean, talking about how this was amazing and the next best thing to sliced bread. And actively making pitches, right? I mean, I did see some of those reels and whatnot. They were proper pitches. Warikoo has said that he didn't know that it was going to be used as a pitch, right? And look at Chetan Bhagat, man. I mean, he is India's highest selling author, I think. Maybe I mean, Amish probably has sold more than him, thankfully, right? But yeah, I mean, it's absurd. And, when something like this happens, you can't just shrug your shoulders and say, hey, you know what, I didn't know, or, I'm sorry, right? I mean, you can't do that. You can't do that in the real world, right? And why should it be any different in the digital world? If you remember about a year back, there was this huge scam, not exactly a scam, but there was this crypto exchange Vault that shut down, right? And a bunch of these finfluencers had promoted it, right, as well. And I made the point then as well that, look, I mean, if you're not going to be responsible, then you're just inviting regulation. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I think it's time because 2 weeks back, right, we covered the whole finfluencers, how they are propagating false information to spike up stock prices for an entity, right? And even this startup funding scam, so to call it, is not the first time that it has happened, but This has gained popularity firstly because of the sort of names they promoted, the way they marketed it, and of course, the way they engage with the influencer
Yeah,
community.
see, financial advisory anyway is regulated. It is certified and regulated, whatnot. But this is a bit of a gray area, right? I mean, you can always say that, look, I wasn't really technically promoting anything, or I wasn't asking people to buy a booth or attend the thing or whatever. But some of these reels are like fairly explicit as well, right? I mean, you can't really get away from that. So, yeah, I mean, I just hope that people take more responsibility, if not influencers, right? At least people realize that, hey, what's in it for them? Why are these folks saying? And it's just a short term game. And I mean, 2021, we had all sorts of bad actors enter the system, right? Because there was a lot of money, there was a lot of frothy stuff, right? Valuation and money, whatever. I think you're seeing the remnants of it, right? Because this kind of behavior, I mean, I don't think it'll be rewarded. I mean, they're all
No,
going
right
to
now, I think there are police
disappear.
cases being filed against the organizers and all, and we'll see how this story pans out.
Yeah.
Okay, talking about edtechs, an academy last week announced that they're laying off 12% of its staff, or about 380 employees, in its fourth official round of layoffs to make its business more profitable. Now, just 4 months back, they had laid off 350 people, or about 10% of its staff, in November. The impacted employees will be getting severance pay equivalent of the notice period and an additional 1 month's pay, along with accelerated vesting of 1 year of employees who have served the company for at least a year. Now, while I do understand that companies really need to tighten up operations, you have to get out of the high, which was in 2021, 22. The whole funding high is scaling rapidly. So given that, hey, this is a reality now, how do you think startup community can get together to manage this better?
It's a difficult situation, right? I mean, I've said this before, I mean, founders have to do what it takes to run a business, right? And it's just, you could say mismanagement. You could say that, hey, I mean, we didn't really realize that, the situation would get so real so soon, or whatever it is, right? But yeah, hopefully, I mean, these folks who've been let go are, it's a soft landing for them, right? I mean, they have, a severance, and they're also like being helped with some job opportunities and whatnot. I see a lot of startups coming together on different forums and creating like a list and a job board and everything for folks who've been laid off. I think that's really awesome. Right. And folks, I mean, if someone's listening to this and you have lost your job, unfortunately, please do reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm happy to refer you to any place that, would be relevant for you. Happy to do that. It's just one of those, it's a time where you have to shed excesses, I am really happy about the fact that, there are still companies that don't do the seesaw, right? I mean, 2021, they didn't really go berserk and like spend like a ton of money on customer acquisition, hire like, 20 people that they didn't need and all of that. And then, shed all of that stuff come 22, 23, right? I am really glad that there are still such companies. I, in fact, work for one such company. So shout out to Wimo's founders. I mean, we've done amazingly well. So it's just a learning process, I suppose, for some of these founders. These are folks who are 26, 27, maybe 30, whatever, first startup. And this kind of creative destruction will happen periodically. It'll happen. I wish I could say this is the last time and we'll learn and we'll be wiser and everything, but it is something that will periodically happen.
And also, like, if you think about it, right? Like mid of last year, there was this whole topic about the great resignation happening, where people are walking out of companies. Just look how tables have turned, and
no, but
that
still is real. I think COVID really made people evaluate their priorities again, right? So when I talk to candidates, etc., I mean, remote is still on the table, fractional is still on the table, work from home or freelance is still on the table, consulting is still on the table, right? It's just that, it's very uneven in the way it is split, right? Because the people who are really like the top 1%, top 5% can ask for all of those things, right? I mean, the rest of them really have to play with what the market offers.
Okay, now let's talk about the PhonePe's S20 acquisition. As you all know, PhonePe has cancelled its plan to acquire ZestMoney, which they had announced in November last year. And this whole deal was pegged at around $200 to $300 million. PhonePe had to cancel due to various reasons, including a slowdown in fintech sector, regulatory environment, and also, of course, the macroeconomic conditions. But a person in the know said that the deal also had to be cancelled as ZestMoney didn't meet the due diligence and the company is not going ahead with the acquisition deal. But if you look at this, right, this when this was announced, it was so much of excitement within the ecosystem that hey, you know what? Now phone is acquiring Z20 to get access to the merchant network, and through the merchant network, they'll start credit lending vertical. Many people are saying that paying $200 million for a lending license, so to say, would make sense at the start of 2022, but in 2023, it's not a smart move. So what's your take on that?
I think they're just trying to renegotiate. We saw this happen with the whole Build Desk and Pay You acquisition as well, right? I mean, it was
$4.7 billion.
yeah, $4.7 billion. Now, look, 2021 and 22, 23 are very different times. Might have made sense in the heydays of 22 to offer 200 million for something like this. But yeah, I mean, the market has turned and so has the reality, right? I mean, anything, man. I mean, you look at Elon Musk acquiring Twitter for $44 billion. I saw a comment from him the other day that, Twitter is probably worth $18 billion or something, right now. Yeah, I mean, basically they forced his hand to acquire Twitter. Otherwise, I mean, he would have backed out, basically, at that valuation, right? It's just tough for all the people involved. These acquisitions, mergers are never really done until they're done, right? Until it's on the dotted line and everything. And yeah, I mean, due diligence is, it's one way of putting it, And... it's not like PhonePe doesn't have money, right? I mean, they're just raising $1 billion or so at $12 billion valuation. But yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the number.
All right, moving on to our Talk of Town section where we have this tweet by Mrinal Talukdar. He writes, Diganta Das, a manual labor of packaging food industry of South India, returned home during COVID and dared to open small packaged parota making units in Vishwanath, Chariali and Lakhimpur, churning out an average 1,200 packets daily at each center, capturing market from Tezpur to Tinsukia. Then with two other partners and technology and machinery from South India, they're producing the finest quality parotas and are employing close to 10 to 12 people in each unit.
Amazing.
Similar units are also operational in Jorhat and Dibrugarh by similar people in partnership, while known brands are marketing them, said Diganta Das of Gopur. Do you know where Gopur is?
Gopur, I mean, I don't know, maybe Chhattisgarh? No.
I have no idea. But imagine such stories are
I mean, it's pretty awesome, right? I mean, I remember reading this story of a few migrant workers, right, who had to unfortunately go back because of COVID and whatnot, and who started a whole garment manufacturing unit in Bihar, right? That entire town, in fact, I mean, they had hundreds of these folks who had just started that same business. They were working in garment manufacturing in Maharashtra, I think, who went back and started this business there. So, look, Indians are amazingly industrious, entrepreneurial, right? I mean, we call it an informal economy, but it's really an entrepreneurial economy, right? And somewhere, somewhere this whole employment became it became aspirational for the educated folks and whatnot. But I do feel that if you enable entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs like this, magical things can happen, really. And, technology is the way to go, I think. Yeah.
So, Roshan, before we wrap up this week's roundup, why don't you talk us through the upcoming conversations?
So next week we have Arindam of Atomberg on the podcast. He is a wonderful operator. He's seen the whole 0 to 100 crore journey with them. And Atomberg is kind of revolutionizing home appliances. I hadn't heard of them until about 2 or 3 weeks back, when Arindam's tweet popped up on my timeline. Right, so I'm really looking forward to understanding, how they've built this fantastic brand. Let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to take this up with Arindam.
And along with that, also let us know what other things you would want us to talk about. And of course, you can reach out to us via social media handles. And if you want to subscribe for regular updates, do click on the WhatsApp link you'll see in the description below. So that's it for this week. Thanks for staying all the way till the end. And Roshan and I will be back again next week with more exciting updates. Take care.
Thanks, guys. See you.